Hi, this week's module is all about defining your target audience, which is a huge part of creating a social media strategy and so important to using social media in strategic communication. And the phrase I use to sort of drive this home is if you try to speak to everyone, you speak to no one. There is no way that a general marketing message is personal enough, especially on social media, to have resonance with any particular audience. Um, in my design class, I have students, I require my students to tell me, who the target audience is for the piece of design they're working on. And invariably, I'm going to get someone who's, doing a brochure for a weight studio and says, my target audience is everyone from 13 to 75 who wants to exercise. Well, the fact is that there's no way you can talk to everyone with one piece of material from 13 to 75. They don't respond. They're not in the same places. They're not watching the same media. They don't respond to the same messages. And if you're trying to make a message that's so generic that all those people will respond to it, it's going to be a really boring, really mediocre message. And boring and mediocre, don't work. No one listens to those. So, if you try and speak to everyone, you speak to no one. And the fact is that everyone uses target audiences all the time. If you think back to when you were a kid and you wanted ice cream and you knew that dad was a softer touch than mom, well, who did you ask? You targeted your message to dad. And you knew that if you were forced to ask mom, the same message that you used with dad probably wouldn't work, and you'd need to use another one. Maybe there would be a, I'll take out the garbage every day this week if you give me money for ice cream, as opposed to dad, it would be, remember, I'm your favorite child. Give me money for ice cream. So that's how a target audience works. So, since target audiences are so important, target markets are so important, how do you find them? Well, there's sort of two cases. One is a business that's already in existence, and one is a business that's just starting up. If you're already in existence, then you already have some sort of market, some sort of customer base. And so where you need to start is to examine them. You need to completely define them. You need to know everything about them. You need to know what they want, where they live, what they aspire to, what makes them tick. You need to do a sort of complete analysis to really get inside the head of your consumer. So when you're defining your customer or your client, you start with demographics. Who are they? You want to know their age, their location, their gender, their socioeconomic status, their education level, their marital or family status, their occupation, and their ethnic background. We call those things demographics. And one of the best places to find those is the US Census. And then we have psychographics. Psychographics are relatively new. They're not new, but they're newer than the idea of behind demographics. And psychographics are about, as the word psycho suggests, right, is about thinking. What motivates your customer base? Who do they aspire to be? Or from an article that I have put inside of the module from Inc. They discuss it, they talk about it as psychographics as including personality, attitudes, values, interests and hobbies, lifestyles, and behavior. And then you need to think about it, to me this is also part of psychographics, is what is the problem that you're solving with your product or service? What is the pain point? So the pain point, I mean, it doesn't even have to be pain. The pain point can be they want to be cooler than they are. And so we're telling them that if they drink this, alcohol, that women or handsome men will flock to their side and they will become cool. That's a pain point, although not necessarily too much pain involved in that unless, of course, they overindulge in the alcohol, but that's a whole different problem. So anyhow, it's what problem are you solving with your product or service? So how do you find this out as a business that's already established? Well, the easiest or perhaps the most direct way is to meet them, right? Get to know them. Talk to them. If you're a large-ish organization, medium to large business, you can hold focus groups. I mean, if you're the local pizza parlor, you can also hold focus groups, but probably you're not gonna. Um, for smaller organizations, you can use sort of what we call a proxy, right? You can listen to them on social. And that's what this class is about. You want to read their blogs, read their posts on Facebook, listen to their tweets. You want to engage them on these medium, and you can just flat out ask them what it is that they want. And you can ask them about themselves. You can try and find what other places do they go and what do we know about them because they go there, right? You can also, particularly for local businesses, use tools like Esri, and Esri is part of this week's module. Esri is a sort of a database that is geographically based and gives a lot of lifestyle. In fact, it gives a sort of lifestyle overview of the people that live in this neighborhood. So if you're the local pizza parlor, that's the kind of tool that you'd use and say, well, who are my neighbors? Who are the people most likely to drive by and come in and have pizza? And what does that tell me about them? There's also a website called VALS, and VALS are sort of a classic example of psychographic groups. You can see what psychographic groups exist in the United States and then see which one you think your customers fit in. I'll put a link to VALS in the module. It's pretty cool. You should take the VALS test yourself because it gives you an idea of how it works. As a large business, you can subscribe to VALS and they will give you a lot of insight into your customers. As a small business, again, it's mostly trying to figure out who it is you see in front of you and who it is who's in your neighborhood, and then which of the VALS categories. And they have separate categories, by the way, for pretty much every country. One of the VALS categories includes your customers. Now, if you're starting out, if you're starting a company from scratch, you need to look at what you do. What does your product or service do really well? What pain point, what problem does it solve? And then you need to say, well, who needs that? Right? And then, sort of more than needs, who cannot do without that? Then you need to ask if these people can afford what you're doing. And in each of these spots, you want to, sort of, do a gut check, right? If you're providing a service for a clientele that doesn't exist, you're going to need to rethink something. But so you want to make sure that the people who you're targeting can afford the service that you're offering. And then you need to see what kind of locations is this going to be an internet-only business? Is this going to be a local, working in the neighborhood kind of business? Is this going to be a larger business? Maybe, I don't know, you're starting a franchise, which would be an odd place to start, but you know what I mean. If you come into or take over a larger business, then you're going to look at the locations that you're in, right? And then you need to look at your competitors. And you need to think, what do we do that's the same? And what do we do that's different? What is their target audience? Who is it that they're speaking to? And then how is my target audience different from theirs? And do I need to try and attract some of theirs, or do I need to go out in a completely different direction? Now, the competitors, we're going to have another module that includes competitor analysis, so that is less important in this module, but it's hugely important when you're defining when you're putting together any sort of strategic communication strategy, and especially a social media strategy. I cannot stress this enough. Smaller is better. The smaller the target audience you start with, the better you will be able to speak directly to them. This goes back to, if you try and speak to everyone, you speak to no one. Smaller is better. The more precisely you can define your audience segment, target segment, you'll find that a lot in marketing, target segment, right? The better you can define that, the more precisely you can reach them and the more you can tailor your message to them. Now, does that mean that one segment needs to be the only people you're speaking to? No, you can have multiple segments. And in fact, most businesses do have multiple segments. They just should use different material and different ways to reach out to them. For the purposes of this class and for your assignment, I really only want you to define one, and I want you to define it fairly narrowly, so that you can create a very well-defined, very clear social media strategy that directly targets that audience segment. But keeping in mind, again, that because you're making it so small, most businesses have more than one. And the thing is, this definition process never stops. You're always looking at who it is that you're communicating with, and you're always refining those segments, those market segments, those audience segments that are receiving your message. Again, just because you want small, well-defined one doesn't mean you don't have more than one. Let's take JetBlue, right? JetBlue has many audience segments. Two obvious ones are low-budget travelers, people who are trying to save money, people who will make sacrifices to save money. These are probably younger people. These are, lower socioeconomic people, but with a certain floor. And they know all this information about that's the budget traveler market. And then there's also the people who fly their business class, who fly their first class. These people are willing to spend a lot of money to travel. What's important for them is comfort. They need to tell what makes their, business class, upper class, larger legroom, better food, nicer movie area, what makes it special and different from the other low-cost airlines that they're competing with. Right? When you think about it, as someone like Spirit has a million segments, the people who are flying with just their naked self in the seat, well, not maybe naked, but with purse, nothing else, maybe a purse, and then the people who are willing to, pay for a carry-on bag, then the people who will pay for both a carry-on bag and a checked bag, the people who also want snacks. So, again, these are segments. You need to define each segment very narrowly, but you can have more than one segment. So to sum up, what do we need to know when we're targeting an audience? We need to know demographics, which come from the U.S. Census, or there's a link to a tool called Simply Analytics, which takes the information from the U.S. Census and makes it kind of a cool map that's really fun to look at, and it gives you a better sense sometimes of what the numbers in the census mean. But again, the numbers come from the U.S. Census. Psychographics, which we can get from Esri, which we can get from VALS, which you can pay a lot of money for a number of other custom programs, including things like ComScore, but we don't have those yet, so let's stick with Esri, and then if you want to take a look at you should take a look at VALS and see how that works out. And then you need to know the pain point. What is the problem you're solving? What does your product do? Why should people buy from you? Why should people listen to you in the case of public relations? Right? Why should this particular piece of communication get their attention? And lastly, remember that this needs to be a tightly defined segment. You can have more than one segment, but they need to be well defined. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the module.